Michael Lacey Freeman has been working in the field of ELT for over 30 years, both as a teacher and materials writer. He has co-authored a number of course books for students at primary, secondary, and university. He's also a storyteller, and 21 of his stories have been published, 6 of which have won international awards. His most successful story, Egghead, has been used in classrooms around the world to address the problem of bullying. The sequence to this story, Egghead the movie, has just been published. Since 2017, he has been on the board of directors of the prestigious Extensive Reading Foundation, an organisation that promotes reading around the world, and hence why we're here today. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you. It's a very exciting day for all of us. We've been talking about it for a while. And we got together, as Peter said earlier, and Rob explained, and it's a wonderful moment. It's like our first birthday in a way. That today is the launch, and so what I wanted to do today really is to maybe just go through a few things with you, but maybe try to answer the question: why Italy? Why do we need an extensive reading association in Italy? That's the subject of my talk, and I'm just frantically trying to close windows here so that you can see my screen in all its glory and my slides. And so, yeah, basically, I want to talk to you about this subject. Why Italy? Why is it time for Italy to have its own, very own extensive reading association? And one of the greatest passions is stories, reading stories, writing stories, telling stories. And so I think it's fitting on this special occasion that I begin with a story. This is a story that I told some time ago. I told this story first in 2019 in a conference. I told this story, but I'd never really written the story down. And I decided for this event to make a written version of this story, which is available on the Padlet that you can download and you can read and try out with your students. But now we're going to hear the oral version of the story. It's called The Boy in the Lake, and it's a true story. And the boy is me. It's when I was a very young boy, I would go to school, and I would often take different routes to school, different ways, just to sort of make it a little bit more interesting. My school wasn't far from where I lived, and there was a kind of an interesting lake that sometimes I used to walk alongside because it was interesting. There were lots of people, and there was lots of wildlife around. So it was always a good way to start the day for me. So often I took this walk, and one day I was walking along the lake, and I could hear a sound. I could hear some birds, some ducks, baby ducks. I was listening to them, and I tried to get a bit closer to the edge of the lake to sort of to watch them on the side of the lake. It wasn't a very big lake, and then I felt a push, and suddenly I was in the water. Now I was very young, as I said, and I hadn't learned to swim. And I did what all people do when they don't know how to swim. I panicked. My arms were everywhere, and I was having difficulty. And then suddenly everything went black. Everything went dark. There was silence, and I don't remember anything. I just remember nothing. The silence, the darkness, the cold. It just became a period where it was like I didn't exist, like time stopped. Time began again. When I was on the shore, somebody had pulled me out of the lake, and I was on the ground, and there was a man, and he was asking me, "Are you all right? Are you okay?" And I said yes, but a very typically English response, saying yes. Of course, I wasn't all right. I was in pain. I was frightened. I was confused, especially because now I was frightened of the water, and swimming lessons were about to begin in my school. I was going to take swimming lessons every Wednesday afternoon. And naturally, I had a fear of the water at that point. I didn't really want to go in the water. But I had to. Wednesday afternoon, there was the lesson. I remember the first lesson very well, going into the changing rooms, getting ready, going out to the swimming pool. It was an outdoor pool. Getting up to the edge of the pool, going down the steps. 1, 2, 3. But the teacher could see I was very, very scared. And so she gave me something to help me, which were called armbands, which you put on your arms, both arms, and they help you to keep your head above the water so that you can feel safe and confident, and you know that your head's not going to go down. And I used these armbands for every lesson, and I got a little bit more confident. The teacher taught me how to move my arms and my legs to propel myself through the water, taught me how to breathe, taught me all of the things you need to know to swim. And I made progress. And soon the term finished, and it was the last lesson of the school term. And I was actually a little bit sad it was the last swimming lesson. By this time, I enjoyed it. And my teacher, just as I was walking down the steps to begin the first lesson, said to me, "Well done, Michael. You're making good progress." And then I did the lesson. At the end of the lesson, the teacher called me, just as it ended. Said, "Michael, come here." And so I swam towards her with my big red armbands. And I got to the edge of the pool. And the teacher looked at me, and she crouched down. She went down like this to get to my level. And she said, "Well done, Michael. You can swim." And I said, "Well, yes, miss, I can swim. I have my armbands." And she said, "No, Michael, you can swim. When we were talking at the beginning of the lesson, I took the air out of your armbands." And I looked from left to right, and to my delight, my armbands were as flat as pancakes. There was no air in my armbands, and I could swim by myself. I realized it, and it was one of the greatest days of my school life. What was happening there was a person who was doing 3 things, and it's something that teachers do. We teachers try to cover 3 roles, really, but at least 3 roles. And these 3 roles she was covering to perfection. She was swimming teacher. She was teaching me the techniques, how I can, so the thing, how to move my arms and my legs and so on. But she was also creating an environment for me where I could learn. Taking away some of the obstacles, some of the fear factor, making it the conditions right for me to learn and to grow and to thrive and to get better. And she was also a cheerleader, because she was saying, "Well done, Michael." And I still remember that "well done." Why am I telling you this story, which is available on the Padlet and you can download? Well, just because I think to a certain extent, that's what graded reading, extensive reading can do. It can offer an environment where your students can learn, can read with confidence. And that's one of the reasons we are here today, to talk about this and how we can do it, how we can create this environment for our students to start reading more, engaging in extensive reading. Now, my introduction to extensive reading was when the first graded reader that I wrote, and I still remember it, and I remember the joy of writing this. It wasn't just like just any kind of job for me. I was used to writing jobs. I was writing material for course books and things like this, but this was something else. This was something special. This was where I was taking a story, a beautiful story, and getting the spirit of it and all of its complexity, all of the emotions, and trying to express that in simple language that a student of English would follow without any difficulty. The level was elementary. I loved the whole process. I loved it so much that I remember thinking, please let me be good enough. Let me be good enough so I can write another one. And 2 months after this, after finishing the story you see in front of you now, I got a message from the editor, and she wrote to me, and she wrote, "Michael, we're in the final." And the final of the Extensive Reading Language Learner Literature Foundation Award. It was the longest award I've ever heard in my life. Normally awards are quite short, you know. And I was obviously delighted. And it was the first kind of confirmation to me that I could do it. But the thing that really stuck with me, the reason I was celebrating primarily was not because of the award. It was because I was able to write another one. I knew then I was able to do this, something that I loved. And I've been writing stories ever since. And these are the last 3 stories I've written. For example, Eke the Movie, The Drum, and Botro's Big Question. Botro's Big Question is about a Mongolian girl who lives in Italy. The Drum is about a boy who lives in the UK. And Eke the Movie is about a girl who lives in the UK. But they're all like the same age or a little bit older than the target reader, so that the reader can relate to these characters and engage in a story, in their story. So, you know, I built up quite over the years quite a lot of a library of my own stories, and it's growing and growing, and I can't stop because I love doing it. So for me, it's very logical step to be involved in the whole concept of extensive reading and the practice of it as well, the application of it, as well as the writing, the material. It seems logical, and I'm so happy to be surrounded by people who've all got different things to contribute to this whole process. And it's wonderful to be here right now. So why Italy? Why is it so important that we have one in Italy? Well, I think in Italy we have a lot of this intensive reading, and that's a good thing too. It's an important thing. Reading difficult texts that are challenging, so the progress can be very slow, and because it's like a stop-start thing. You know, you've got like challenges, like vocabulary and structures that are in the way. I remember Rob giving a talk once, and he was talking about it's a bit like having the speed bumps you find in a residential area. When you're reading intensively, you're having to sort of stop, slow down to go over the bumps, and I like that, and that really struck me, that analogy actually. Whereas in extensive reading, maybe the road is flat. You can go a little bit faster, sometimes a lot faster, depending on the level. And vocabulary and structures are within a comfort zone. So the student can actually race through it, can actually enjoy it and jump inside the story. I'm confident, just as I was with my armbands. I learned to swim with those armbands. The armbands didn't stop me learning to swim. They actually helped me to learn to swim. Graded readers and reading, extensive reading has an important role, but not just with fiction, also with non-fiction too. That's an enormous contribution that we can make to a child's education with applying extensive reading. One of the things that in Italy that's particular to Italy, I think, is there are a lot of projects that we have to do. There's an opportunity to do projects, and projects can be used to around a story, or stories, or a number of stories. And what we want is our students to engage, to react, and to create. Reaction, creation, this cycle. If we can get our students to have a reaction, they want to create something. They want to make the story their own in some way by contributing. I just want to give you a few ideas. I went to Mongolia in November, and I literally met thousands of young readers. And I want to say that now that we are part of this family, let's say, it's a global family. We are really like extending the walls of our classroom. By engaging in extensive reading, there is the potential to reach out in the future to students from all over the world who maybe are reading the same books or doing the same projects. This makes the language real for the kids that you teach. It makes it bigger, it makes it real, it makes it relevant to see the peers in other parts of the world doing the same thing. This is in Vietnam, a group called Across the Sky, which I'm involved in, and some Italian schools are also involved in, the Italian students, where students share stories together. And it's this togetherness, is this community that's also important. And of course, lots of interesting ideas can be generated from this whole process. Like this is a fascinating idea. Like in Mongolia, there's a lorry container that is now not used, and they are used around the city of Ulaanbaatar. They're warm places for kids to hang out when it's cold. Sometimes when I was there, it was minus 28 degrees. So, quite chilly. These containers are warm, obviously, they're insulated, and there are books in there. Kids do their homework together, but they also read books. So you can just see there's a child clutching a book there. And I went into one of these containers and met some of the students, met some of the kids. There's also in Mongolia, there's something called a loud library, which is an interesting idea. It's really attractive to kids. Lots of kids go there because in this library, the rule is you can make a noise. This is wonderful, irresistible for children, especially young children. You're allowed to make a noise. This is Italy. This is Monte Grosso d'Asti, the teachers and the students from Monte Grosso, where I've been working with for 2 or 3 years on extensive reading. And I'm going there next month to continue. We're talking about ideas in another school as well in Perugia, but also this school here about reading marathons and things like that, and trying out these things. And the response is very positive, both from the students and the teachers. And of course, it's reflected in the press as well. I've been reporting it. This is something from La Stampa. But other countries as well. Here's Brazil, where they're sharing a kind of a theatrical performance related to the story in question. And they're some of the stories I write, like the story about called Egghead and Egghead the movie. These two stories are about bullying. The first one about bullying, and the second one about cyberbullying. They have kind of helped to sort of make this kind of reaction creation cycle get moving. And lots of posters have been made and other things have been done. Computer games as well. At one school I went to, they made a computer game with Egghead. Posters, plays, radio shows, TV programs, everything, you name it, there's a response to it. It's easier somehow for a child to relate, to talk about these kinds of things, sensitive issues, through the eyes of a character in a story. And this is another thing that can happen. Students create, and they're kind of dealing with some of their own anxieties and some of their own issues in a way that feels safe, feels safer. It's an environment where they can actually express themselves about these things. This is an example of a comic book story that I wrote called Misaki, about a Japanese girl. And actually the students, they liked the story, I think. They enjoyed it, but they wanted to change the ending. They didn't like the ending very much. They wanted a more dramatic ending, something like not a happy ending. And so they actually rewrote the last 6 frames, which I think is wonderful. And this is an old photograph that I always use because I just love it. It just sums up what happens if I ever visit. Children have read one of my stories. There's this kind of the formal meeting afterwards, and it's not just Italy but other countries too. There's a little circle of students who gather around. They've got some extra questions they want to ask, and that's a special moment. I always allot time for this because I know it's important. And the questions are very interesting. In Italy, when I do this, interestingly enough, I'd never tell them that I know Italian, obviously, so that they are engaging with me in English. And by the end of the meeting, they know that I speak Italian. We reveal this to them. But just some of them continue speaking in English, which is very interesting. They've had a go, they've established a channel, a relationship with me in English, and they feel confident enough to keep on going. Rob mentioned the Language Learner Literature Award earlier on. Another reason why we should have an extensive reading association, why we have an extensive reading association in Italy, is because these awards, there are 18 books in the final, there are 6 categories, and 1/3 of them, 6 of these books, at least 6 of these books are made in Italy. They are made by publishers, Italian publishers, or writers, Italian writers, or writers based in Italy, like myself. And this is quite phenomenal. We should have a place at the table. We should be involved because we produce a lot. And this is quite normal. This often happens. And so we should be a part of it, I think. So finally, I'm okay for time, Vanessa. I've got a few more minutes.
Yep, you've got 7 minutes.
7 minutes just to say, what can ERA do? Well, I've got 4 things here, I think the key things. Offer, allow, provide, and inform. Offering for support to teachers. We are also teachers, but we teach in Italy. We've spoken to Italian teachers at all the different schools. We've had our own experiences. We know what the reality is in Italy, what the challenges are, and so this gives the chance to sort of think of ways in which extensive reading can be applied in the Italian context. Because maybe sometimes when you're doing things or you read about extensive reading, you think, yeah, well, it's all very well, but in Italy it's much. But we can provide that kind of support to talk about how it can be done in Italy. It allows you to be part of a global network, as I said. This is something really exciting. Rob mentioned the World Congress, but even today, there are many, many friends from different parts of the world that have come here to offer their support. It's very, very late in the day, and some of them are still here, I think. And there is a community there, and a community that can help and can offer suggestions, support, advice. And also, with having an extensive reading association in Italy will help to provide a theoretical underpinning. We just listened to Letizia's talk, for example, and we'll hear other talks that help us to understand what place extensive reading has, how it can be applied, why it's important, what goes on in a child's head when they're reading. Which is fascinating, and what happens, and why is it important for language learning? Why is it fundamental, so fundamental? And finally, to inform you about the resources available. It's all very well. Okay, these stories are great. Where do I find these stories? How do I find them? Where can I go? And we will give you that kind of information. This xreading.com is an example that Paul, the director of the xreading.com, is here today. I don't know if he's still here. ER Central is something that Rob manages, and there are resources that you can turn to and use, and there will be other resources too. Speaking about resources, okay, so as I said, the story that I told you at the beginning of my little presentation, I put it onto the Padlet. The level, I kind of put a level, I would say it's an A2 level story. It's got, but what I want to do is so that's in the Padlet. I want to make an A1 version as well, and maybe even a B1. So you can look at the difference. It's the same story, how it changes with the level of difficulty. And you can think about what level would be best for your students. Because in 1 month's time, we'll speak about this later, we would like to meet, we'd like to set up a monthly meeting on Facebook Live, if you have Facebook, which we will call a happy hour, where we can chat about reading, about stories, about fiction, about non-fiction, a chance for us to get together for a little while and talk about these types of things. And one of the things we can talk about next week on the 23rd of May is this story. Did you try it out? What difficulties do you think we'll have? What level is more appropriate for your students? Should it be a lower level than the level they have? The same level? This kind of thing, these kinds of issues and questions we can bring out. I would say the best thing to do with extensive reading is to choose the level that's lower than the level that your students have generally. And that's quite key, I think, so that your students can improve their fluency and move fast, build confidence, and it makes a huge difference. But we'll talk about all these things. This shouldn't be just a one-off thing. This is the beginning of a relationship, I hope. Please feel free to join us and participate and help us as well to get this really thriving, get this moving, the Extensive Reading Association. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.